Well, hello and an extremely warm welcome to my channel. I'm Louise Savage of Louise Savage Muses. A really warm welcome if you are a new viewer to my channel, and an extremely warm welcome as well if you are returning. I think I've said extremely twice, but there we go. So the weather has taken a turn for the worse. We've got some rain here in the UK at last. The garden is enjoying it. So I thought I'd come inside. I've given up trying to do anything out there. I'm just going to get soaked and wrap up my reading for July. I would say this month has been a bit more varied. I've enjoyed what I've read, but well, as you'll see, one or two of the books that I've chosen have sort of challenged me a little bit. Not that there's anything wrong with that. So without further ado, I will talk to you about them. So the first book I read this month was Holly by Stephen King. Now, this is only the second book by Stephen King that I've ever read, and which is a bit weird because Misery, the other one that I've read, which was written decades ago, is actually one of my favourite books. It stayed with me. I don't think I'd ever read anything quite like it when I read it. I read it when I was a lot younger. And also, I think the film with Kathy Bates is really powerful as well, and a fairly faithful retelling, certainly of the atmosphere of the novel. So I picked this up when I was on holiday, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. I mean, boy, can he write! I think so. It tells the story of there's a female detective called Holly. Holly Gibney, I think she is. She's appeared in some other of his novels, apparently. So this is more of a, I probably ought to say, this is more of a sort of thriller detective style novel than perhaps a horror novel, although there are elements in it which are really horrific, but there's nothing supernatural. This all, you know, is very much founded in the real world, and it's a complete page turner. So Holly Gibney is a female investigator, private detective, working for her own. I'm not sure it is her own agency, actually. I think it is, and she is contacted by the mother of a young girl called Bonnie who has disappeared. Her bike was found abandoned, and they don't know where she's gone. She's just vanished. And of course, that's not actually the start of the novel. So although that's the sort of the prompt for the investigation, right at the very beginning, in the opening few pages, a young academic is, I think he's walking home, he might be running, and he stops to assist someone who's broken down, and something really appalling happens to him. So you've got this kind of, the tension starts right from the beginning. And I've got to be really careful what I say now because I don't want to give any spoilers away. But let's just say that the perpetrators of the crimes in this book are really hidden because they are in full view. You know, they are not the sort of people that, not that I would say there is a type who might do really cruel things to others. But they're not, you know, they are eminent members of society, and they are also elderly. And I think that's what makes this novel really interesting, I think. The other thing that I enjoyed about it, I mean, I was on holiday, I needed something that I was going to, you know, page turn really quickly. There's lots of sort of time shifts. The structure's quite interesting. But Stephen King wrote this after COVID, and it features COVID. And you know, I was really interested as I was reading it to get his take on the state of America during COVID and since, and I think he captures that really well, and he doesn't sort of hold back in terms of showing his disappointment with the, you know, the re-election of Trump, etc. So there's a sort of slightly political, with a small p, element to this novel as well, which I really enjoyed. I thought it just gave me a kind of it's like sort of taking the temperature of a certain type of American as I was reading it, and it's full of interesting characters too. So yeah, a sort of a romp, except a romp implies fun, and you know, this is scary stuff. And then I went from the sublime to the ridiculous. So this was part of the Savage Prompts. This was a book that I've read this month in response to those prompts. So Simon and I are trying desperately to keep up with our prompts, and I think this might be the June prompt. I think I'm almost up to speed. And basically the prompt was, whichever one it was to read a book by your favourite author's favourite author. Now I don't have a favourite author. I have lots of favourites, but I decided to choose Kate Atkinson. So I did a bit of research, and apparently this isn't her absolute favourite book, and I wish I could remember what it was. It was something like Madame Bovary, because I'd already read that and I wanted to read something I hadn't read before. But this is definitely one of her favourite books. So it's Lolita by Vladimir Nabokov. Now this is a book that I've had on my shelves for quite a while. It's a classic. And you know, I've heard it mentioned and referenced lots and lots of times during my lifetime, and this is where my reading kind of got sticky and kind of didn't. So so Lolita is a story. The one thing I did know about it was that it was an exploration of paedophilia, that the Humbert, the sort of lead character and narrator, is a paedophile, and that Lolita was a very young girl when he first started up a relationship with her. So I suppose I was a little bit surprised that maybe that this was Kate Atkinson's favourite book because of the subject matter, so that intrigued me. And also what I hadn't realised is that right from the get-go, you kind of know that he's murdered someone, but it's not clear who it is. And so there's a certain amount of suspense throughout this novel, which I wasn't expecting. And I hadn't also realised it's more recent than I thought. I thought that it was written well over 100 years ago, but it wasn't. So it's reflecting a sort of time in America. I think it's, I want to say the 1930s. It probably doesn't say on the blurb. Anyway, Humbert's really fascinating because I expected him to be a kind of unreliable narrator. He's sort of reflecting back over his relationship with Lolita, and I was expecting an unreliable narrator, but in actual fact, he's really forensic and detailed and startlingly honest, I think, which made the novel very, very clever. And he's not really creepy. He's not, you know, what he's doing is, or has done, is deeply unpleasant and socially unacceptable and morally unacceptable. But you don't, because he's being truthful, I didn't feel like I completely despised him like I expected to. Now, that doesn't mean in any sense that I remotely approved of what he was doing. It's horrific, but it kind of makes it more horrific. It's really clever. And the other thing was that Lolita herself surprised me. She's much more precocious. She's much more ballsy, for want of a better word. She's, you know, she's got attitude. She's not some sort of submissive, I mean, she's innocent, but it's a type of innocence. It's not an obvious type of innocence. So I found all of that really fascinating. I have to say though, I got bogged down. I found the pace of it very slow. There's a lot of travelling around America in a car, which I hadn't expected. And lots of lists. I felt like, and I think that's partly because of the sort of the character building that's going on with Humbert, that he sort of lists places they've been, he lists people they've met. He really likes to list, and that is partly what makes him such an interesting narrator in that his attention to details there. But I actually got bored of him, like really bored of him. So there was a point about a third of the way in where I thought I might have to ditch this. I don't know if I want to carry on. But I did, and I'm really glad I did, because boy, has this book made me think. It's just one of those novels that is really provocative in terms of getting an insight into that kind of mind. And actually, I think it is really important to try to do that. You know, we don't have to approve of the people we read about. In actual fact, in some ways, I think it's more beneficial to society if we read about people that we do find disturbing and that we do detest, because actually the only way we can combat those kind of people is to understand the way that their brains work. So yeah, I think I'll be thinking about this for a long time. Really interesting read. And if you have read Lolita, I'd love to know what your thoughts are on it. And then I kind of needed a what I would describe as a palate cleanser. Now, so I read Carol Vorderman's What Now What? She's on a mission to fix broken Britain. Now, during our elections over here, I was an avid, and still am an avid follower of Carol Vorderman on Instagram. I fully recommend. For those of you who are not from the UK, she was, for years and years and years, she was on one of the most popular programmes on TV over here called Countdown with Richard Whiteley, her co-presenter, who sadly died relatively young, I think. And she is a maths genius. She was pushed forward at school a year ahead, because of her fantastic aptitude for maths. But what's really fascinating about her is that she came from an incredibly impoverished background, single parent family, living in Wales, in a part of Wales that is quite deprived on the coast. And she went to an ordinary state school, and yet she went to Oxford, I think it was Oxford, to study engineering and became an engineer. And it was kind of by fluke. I think her mum answered an advert on her behalf for somebody who was a whiz at maths to be on this TV programme. So it was via her mum that she became a celebrity. And she is unashamedly, she's in her early 60s, and she is absolutely not prepared to grow old gracefully. She wants to be able, as you know, she's found the older she gets, the more liberated she feels. And during the election, she was really, really anti-corruption. She despises the corruption of the Conservative government that we had here under Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak et al., Liz Truss. And she was using statistics and voting mechanisms to try to counteract the wealth that is behind right-wing politics in this country. And in this book, she tracks that. She tracks her experience of posting online, the trolling that she got, the abuse she got, but how, despite all that, she was determined to make her point, and how it's really galvanised and energised her. And then right at the end of the book, she's got 10 steps for change, and they make really interesting reading. And you know, most of them are really, really common sense, sensible solutions to the political problems that we have in the UK. So yeah, I am a big fan, and I've probably gone on about this too long, but my goodness, Borders, I really enjoyed this book. Not that I ever think you're going to watch this video, but yeah, superb. And then I moved on to Kate Atkinson's Death at the Sign of the Rook. Maybe this was June's prompt. I think that might have been May, because this was a prompt read too, because one of the prompts was to read a book set in a hotel or motel. And there's a large portion of this novel that takes place in such a stately home that has been converted into a hotel. Now, if you haven't read any Kate Atkinson, do so as soon as possible, remedy that. She's another of these fantastic authors who, she's a literary writer who can turn her hand to pretty much anything. She's written books about, you know, where people move forwards, backwards in time. But she also, this is the 6th in a series of detective stories, I suppose, if you want to give them a, you know, a label, that feature a private investigator called Jackson Brodie. Oh my goodness, is he an amazing character. I just love him. He's deeply flawed. He doesn't respect boundaries. He stumbles into crime scenes and can occasionally cause some real problems. He has a very messy private life, but anyway, so in this story, it's basically revolves around the theft of 2 different pieces of art. One from a set of twins whose mother has just died, and the painting's gone missing from the wall. It was behind her bedroom door where she displayed this painting when she was alive. And the other is a painting that's been taken from the aforementioned stately home. And I just think, I honestly think that Kate Atkinson, I mean, this book made me laugh. It had me on the edge of my seat. It's a sort of Agatha Christie style detective story. And I think she is just, because the other Jackson Brodies aren't really of that ilk. They're a bit more like Ian Rankin. But I just feel like Kate Atkinson was out to have a really, really good time when she wrote this. She's in her 70s now, and I feel like this was a massive and fantastic act of self-indulgence. The final chapters had me absolutely guffawing with laughter. I mean, I don't know whether that was the intention, but I suspect it probably was. She's got a very wry sense of humour. So yeah, I really, really enjoyed this, and I've had this book in my possession for quite a while. I mean, I think I bought it in October. But I was saving it for a holiday read, and it was a grand holiday read. And next up, I wanted something a little bit, I wanted something brief, I wanted something different, I wanted something kind of thoughtful and sort of slow. I don't know if you can see that very well, but this is called Last Night at the Lobster by Stuart Onan. And this book was recommended to me by one of you lovely lots. And stupidly, whenever you recommend things, I put it on my Storygraph TBR. But there probably is a space. I don't know. I don't know whether there's a space there. Some of you all know. To write down who's recommended it. So I'm really, really sorry that I can't remember who it was. And I think it was one individual. I don't think it's something that's been recommended to me by many, many people. Oh my God, I love this book. It's one of those fantastic observations of a person and a place at a particular moment in time. So the Lobster is a restaurant. We're in America. It's a freezing cold winter. The snow is beginning to fall, and the manager of the restaurant, he's managing it on behalf of a chain. He turns up to close the restaurant down. He's called Manny. He turns up to close the restaurant down, to run the final shift at the restaurant. And he's got some relationship issues. His staff are, as any staff in a restaurant would be, you know, real characters. Some work really hard, some not so hard. And so the novel just charts the course of the final evening in the restaurant, and the writing is shrewd, it's beautiful. Interestingly, he's done some work with Stephen King. So there's a little sort of theme developing here, but there's no horror. This is a really realistic experience of a moment in time, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And then something very different. I've been determined to read more non-fiction this year, because what happened last year was I read the Women's Prize for non-fiction, loved it, and then didn't read much non-fiction beyond that. So I thought, well, I need to do something about that. I love Deborah Levy. I've read a few of her novels and really enjoyed them, but I don't think I've read her essays before. And this is like it's called The Cost of Living. and oh my God, it's just fantastic. She's writing about, so she's divorced, she's got older children who she's looking after, and she's writing about the experience of being a single parent in that scenario, but trying to make a living out of writing and how difficult that is. And she has also been recently bereaved because her mother has died, and her mother was clearly a very powerful, dominant figure in her life. And this is just so packed full of sort of humanity. And there are moments where I feel, you know, so she's trying to write in this sort of converted shed, for want of a better word, at the bottom of the garden. She calls it something else, I think, that a friend has kind of supplied for her, because she's got nowhere that she can go and get any peace and be creative. And there are just some amazing moments. There's you know, she sort of contemplates grief. She contemplates the dissolution of her relationship with her husband, tries to make some sense of that. But along the way, she's really entertaining. There's this fantastic description. I don't think I'll be able to find it now, but she's been shopping, and she just feels like one thing after another is going wrong. I'm sure I won't be able to find it. I thought I'd marked it, but anyway, so there's this one scene where she goes shopping, and no, I can't find it. And she buys a chicken for tea, and she's got a bag on her bike. She's cycling home through London with this shopping, and she describes the chicken rolling off with the tangerines and the whatever she's got on there onto the ground. She loses control, and the shopping goes everywhere, all over the ground. She has to stop traffic, and she's run over, or something's run over her chicken. And just the way she describes looking at that chicken and her decision to pick the chicken up but let the tangerines roll down the road, it's just those small details. I'm not making it sound funny, but when she writes about it, it's hilarious. But then the next minute you're really moved because she gets home and there's nobody to tell her, you know, because she realises she's soaked through because she's been cycling home in the rain, and there's no one to say to her, there's no adult in the house to say, go and have a shower, go and get warm, you know, I'll take over. So there's hilarity and there's real poignancy. I've been a single parent in my life, and there's a lot of what she says in here that I found really relatable. And also on grief, you know, she really explores the madness of grief, how you find yourself doing the craziest things. So while her mum's dying, she visits this particular shop run by two Pakistani men, and on the way to the hospital, because her mum's dying and she can't eat, and the only thing that gives her mum any comfort is this particular brand of ice lollies. And so she goes every day, she cycles to the hospital and she buys an ice lolly, and there are certain flavours that her mum prefers, and then at one point all that's left is this horrible bubblegum flavour, and she's really grumpy. But of course she doesn't feel she can explain to the shop owners why it's so important to her that she has these lollies. She can't do it, and it isn't until after her mother dies that she goes in and makes that explanation. You know, so there are all these wonderful sort of really relatable human experiences. Yeah, I thought it was brilliant. And finally, again, some non-fiction. So I actually thought I'd already read this book. So this is The Adventures of Maud West, Lady Detective by Susannah Stapleton. Now, Susannah Stapleton lives only about 10 miles away from where I live. She's a local author, and she very kindly invited me to her book launch about 7 years ago when she launched this book. And I went along, and it was wonderful, and she read some fantastic extracts from the book. And I think in my mind that meant that I'd read it. Well, Simon and I are lucky enough to be interviewing Susannah about her recent publication in Oxford at the end of this month. And so I thought, I'll sort of go back and look at Maud West again. And then to my horror, I realised I never read it in the first place. Well, I've really enjoyed this. It's a really... She sort of stumbles across Maud West by accident. Susannah, I think she's working as a sort of researcher at a museum or some sort of curatorship type job. And she comes across Maud West and starts to become more and more and more fascinated, because she finds these adverts in the papers where Maud is advertising herself as the top female detective. And this is during the Edwardian era. And so Susanna starts to question, you know, who was this woman? What were there any more female detectives? If so, who were they? So if you've really enjoyed, you know, things like Agatha Christie and Dorothy Sayers and people like that, you know, those sorts of detective stories, these are kind of the real women. And Maud West also wrote, so you've got these kind of they're descriptions of her cases, but they read more like short stories. And that's also what's wonderful, because she's really difficult to pin down, this woman. And Susanna sort of finds photographs of her in disguise. In fact, all the photographs on the front of the book are actually photos of Maud in disguise. And so it becomes harder and harder and harder for her, as Susanna's uncovering this story, to work out fact from fiction. So she becomes really intrigued with her private life, with Maud's private life. You get things like the history of blackmail. I didn't realise blackmail was such a big deal in the Edwardian era. It was sort of rife, shoplifting, all those sorts of things. So yeah, if you're interested in that kind of crime, and Susanna, you know, she writes with such clarity. It's very, very engaging. I think it's a real shame that this book came out way before there was a non-fiction prize for women, because I think this would have been a contender. So yeah, again, I wholeheartedly recommend this book to you. It's great. So what have you been reading in July, I wonder? I hope you've had a really lovely month. I hope you've had a particularly good reading month. Thoughts on Lolita, welcome. Thoughts on Stephen King, thoughts on, well, any of the books and writers that I've mentioned today. I'm always interested to hear your opinions. And yeah, happy reading, everybody. Take care. Bye.